Welcome. Thank you for joining me. This is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia, speaking on the subject of the reason religious criminal abuse. And let me remind you that religious criminal abuse is real. It's the most stealth form of abuse amongst all others. It can be sexual, physical, psychological, theological, and all the ripple effects that come with that. It's real. Religious criminality inside these organizations is real. If you take sexual abuse of children, as you can see on the cover, a young girl holding half of her face, she's lost her identity, typifying shame, guilt, and unsurety and confusion. Excuse me. When you think of these things about, in particular, the ones that are most at risk, you can look at sexual exploitation happens to children at any age and background and socioeconomic status, which is interesting, isn't it? Because gender, sexual orientation, and vulnerability are all included in the things that of the characters of these people that get exploited and abused. Offenders can be from an ethnic background, they can be women, men, or other young people. So, while any child can be victim to sexual abuse, children who are vulnerable, isolated, and or have, say, a disability or much more likely to be victimized and are a significant overrepresented group, a student may be vulnerable to sexual exploitation if you notice, or they report any of the following in their relationships. Now listen very carefully. Number 1, threats to end their relationship if they don't have sex. Number 2, demands that they have sex with other people. Number 3, expectations to provide sex in return for food, a place to stay, or drugs or gifts. Number 3, threats to cease the relationship if sexual dares are not carried out. 5. Number 5, receiving money in return for sexual acts. Number 6, requests to provide sexual photos or sharing sexual photos online via text. And 7, threats to humiliate or share sexual images of victims if they don't carry out sexual abuse. This is the sort of exploitation that can happen within these groups, and this is how these predators work. Excuse me. So, if you want to try and identify perpetrators of child sexual exploitation, there are some ways in which you can do that. You can play a critical role in identifying signs that a member of the school community may be engaging in child sexual exploitation. You can, in a way, identify by signs, like we're not on a witch hunt, but you do want to be aware of the signs that might be able to give away these perpetrators. And say, in identifying signs that a member of the school community may be engaging in child sexual exploitation or grooming a child or a young person for the purpose of engaging in sexual activity could be as follows. Most critically, you must report suspected abuse if you, number 1, feel uncomfortable about the way an adult interacts with a child or children. Now, just remember, you can report these people, okay? If it's a false report, you can say sorry, but letting it go, which is what a lot of these religious people do, they just let things go until it's too late, doesn't help anybody. It does not help anyone. And I've put this picture up. This is one that I used to use for the Jehovah's Witnesses, who have this terrible, horrible child sexual abuse what would you call it, culture within its religion, because of its high level of trying to make Jehovah happy or stopping him from being sad, causes all sorts of trouble. Now, I don't know what your local police number is, but don't be frightened to call the police. They are interested in finding these perpetrators. Another one, so let's start again. We'll go number 1. This is the most critically you must report suspected abuse if you, number 1, feel uncomfortable about the way an adult interacts with a child or children. Number 2, suspect that the adult may be engaging in sexual abuse of a child or children. Number 3, suspect that the adult is grooming the child or children for the purpose of engaging in sexual activity. And number 4, reasonably believe that an adult is at risk of engaging in sexual behaviour with a child or children. So in many of these cases, the signs that an adult is sexually abusing or grooming a child with the intent of sexual abusing them may not be obvious, but these are signs that can help. Now, how do you report child sexual exploitation and grooming? Well, this might help you. This might encourage you. If indicators lead you to form a reasonable belief that a child or young person is being sexually exploited, you must follow the 4 critical actions for schools. And there's, let's just see what they are. I can look this. Okay. This is report child abuse in schools or religious organisations. Here we go. For the 4 critical actions you must take are: respond to the emergency, report to the authorities, contact parents, I'd say in particular, or the primary trustworthy carers, and provide ongoing support or hand the situation over to the right authorities. The section steps you through this. These are the steps you've got to go through when you know how to respond if you witness an incident, form a suspicion with reasonable belief. You might receive a disclosure from a student or somebody in the church or a child in the church. You might receive a disclosure from somebody that was in the organisation that's decided that it's time to expose somebody. And that's just some of the stuff that you can do to start the process of getting these people convicted. Now, I think we should turn to the scriptures before we run out of time, because the object of this is to reveal why these well-intending, good-intending people are turning evil. Because the biggest question is, how can people that do not mean to do bad do bad? How does it happen? Well, we've realised from Romans chapter 7, which is one of the big authorities on this, that our sinful passions are aroused by the law. Now, you have to come to the fact that there's no shadow of a doubt this is what the Bible's saying. You can't just brush over this. Our sinful passions, the evil capabilities inside of us, are aroused by the things we think we need to do or not do to make God happy or stop him from being sad. There is no shadow of a doubt that's what the Bible says. Is that correct? Our sinful passions, which were or are aroused by the Lord. And the interesting past tense of the word there is were in this passage is Paul's making it clear that the law is over. And us Westerners, we're so ignorant. 2,000 years later, we're still trifling with it in a way to make God happy or stop him from being sad. And that's definitely not what we are supposed to be doing, because it only bears behaviour that leads to harm and even death. Okay, don't underestimate the fact that ministers fall for this as well. If they're not aware that this happens and they've been driven to believe that the things they do or not do are constantly monitored by God as for him to decide whether he's happy or sad with it, that has a psychological effect on somebody to the point where they become obsessed with trying to make God happy or stop him from being sad by their behavior in a way that ultimately allows their sinful nature, their sinful passions, the things that they are actually in the thing to prevent, they actually start to do. I've found this on the internet and I'll put the link below. This is just a general, normal, denominational kind of preacher, right? You'll look in the background there. It's actually got some of the commandments which lead to this problem. This goes for 6 minutes. I'm going to start it now, and I want you just to analyze and consider, how could this have happened?
He was a preacher who couldn't resist temptation, caught between two women, the one he married and the one he desired. So when his wife was found dead in their locked bedroom, her suspicious relatives vowed to find out, was it suicide or murder? Here's Jim.
So there's an element where, and this is what we're talking about with the signs. You can identify signs. This guy's gotten in under the radar, but they haven't let him come to the place where they've become suspicious of this man. Okay, he would have swept this under the carpet. This is a very interesting story.
Jim Avila.
Just a simple church. Look.
With all your heart, with all your soul.
A favorite son in Waco, Texas.
That you may fear the Lord your God, to keep all his statutes and his commandments, which I...
The Baptist
now see that he's a Baptist preacher, and he just said, you shall fear the Lord your God to keep all his statutes and commandments. These people don't realize how dangerous this is. You do not have anything to do with God's statutes or commandments. You're living by faith in Christ. This is the problem. This is the reason for the problem. I'm going to say this again. Look.
The Baptist preacher with a doting congregation and a beautiful family.
If you know our children or not, this is my wife, Carrie, and it's special for me.
Matt Baker, front and center at the pulpit every Sunday in the heart of the Bible Belt.
Hey, with 911, do you have an emergency?
Yes, I think my wife just committed suicide.
Pastor Baker never imagined himself in this life-changing moment, pounding his wife's chest in the middle of the night, on the phone to 911, and reading a suicide note out of the corner of his eye.
Tell me exactly what happened.
My wife is laying in the bed, and her lips are blue, are cold, and there's a note that says, I'm sorry, basically.
Is she conscious?
No, she's not.
Breathing?
No, she's not breathing at all, no pulse or anything.
She was not moving, no response. And I shake her, I call her name, and wow, what do I do? I get her dressed as I'm on the phone.
Did you see what happened to her?
No, I do not know.
The sweet life for Pastor Baker and his 31-year-old wife, Carrie, had come to a sudden stop. The college sweethearts who married within months of their first hellos, both educated at Baylor University, cornerstone of Baptist education, and raising a family bathed in piety and love. The perfect couple from day one.
It was almost an immediate attraction. We liked each other, we fell in love with each other.
Carrie's family thought it all happened too fast, but were reassured by their daughter that Matt was a good man, and being a preacher in Bible-thumping country certainly helped.
It was a whirlwind romance.
Carrie's mother, Linda Doolin.
We tried to talk Carrie into waiting a little longer, and she really did not want to.
So Carrie Baker's Aunt Nancy says the family went along with the rapid-fire romance. After all,
She was marrying a Baptist minister. How good is that?
Matt and Carrie's life together looked so promising, until, without warning, on that spring night, now over 4 years ago, the preacher's wife brought it all to an abrupt end snuffing out the storybook romance, say authorities, with a couple of wine coolers and a bottle of sleeping pills.
Oh, she's got foam or something coming out of her nose. Okay, someone's at the front door. I gotta go.
Those moments stay in your mind. You can't get them out.
A loving husband with big blue eyes and a prominent position, Carrie had it all, including a rewarding career of her own.
Wow!
As a devoted mother and elementary school teacher.
She was always the bubbly little blonde. Cheerleader, mascot in high school, loved athletics, loved life. People were drawn to Carrie, always.
So why would a perfectly healthy mother of two leave a typed, unsigned suicide note professing love for her children, her parents, and her husband, say she is sorry, and then take her own life?
She didn't come at me and say, Matt, I'm going to kill myself.
But Matt says there were clues that his beautiful wife was in a downward spiral. It began, he says, with one monumental tragedy.
I love you.
The loss of their second daughter, a little girl born over a decade ago, who lit up their world. Her name was Cassidy, and she struggled mightily for life. Struck by a brain tumor at a year old, taken from her parents just 4 months later. And everyone agrees her death drove her mother, Carrie, to bouts of terrible grief.
Now, there can be a lot of shame associated with this kind of thing within families in general. It's something that a lot of people never get over. They blame themselves for it. They live with terrible guilt and shame. They feel robbed. They ask questions about God. And this can cause tremendous conflict within Christian people, because God's not supposed to do these things, see? This is just the fragility of life. But when you're living by faith and nothing's supposed to go wrong, these kind of things can cause terrible conflict within the people individually and the couple collectively.
I didn't think she was depressed. I thought it was just a deep sadness.
She had a hole in her heart. It was horrible. She made it through her faith. Her faith was a very big part.
But Matt says Carrie never really made it entirely through the grief, and says her treasured leather-bound Bible, a gift from Matt, is filled with clues to how deep the sadness was. In the margins, around some of her favorite scriptures, evidence, says Matt, that Carrie was hiding dark thoughts of ending her earthly life in favor of a heavenly one with the daughter she lost 7 years before.
There's one in 2 Samuel where David loses his firstborn child, and she writes on the bottom, Cassidy, I will go to her.
What does this tell you?
She could never let go of Cassidy. It was such a strong hold on her.
Carrie did go to a grief counselor for a year. Matt claims she began seeing a therapist again the week of her death, and to a doctor complaining of stress and anxiety. Matt says her once close relationship with their two daughters suffered as Carrie, he says, pulled away.
There was constantly that in her voice and in her prayers and in our conversations that, what if? I lost one, what if we lose another one? I can't handle that.
So now one of the big things of these perpetrators is when they pass the focus on to something especially important, particularly in the case of this, where the problem's been the loss of the child. Now, I'm not sure where this is going to end up because I haven't watched this before. I just pulled this up. But let's see what happens. See how complicated it can get?
The night she died, Matt told investigators about Carrie's depression. They quickly decided that suicide made sense. But almost immediately, some of those closest to Carrie, like her cousin Lindsay Pick, who showed up at the Baker house in her pajamas while police were still on the scene, could not comprehend how the doting mom could leave her kids. They believe suicide was not in Carrie's character. She had other children, including a daughter born just a year and a half after Cassidy died.
She would have never, ever left her children.
Now, this is where we need to step in. These people are looking underneath the surface. This is how you identify these types of crimes. Now, I don't know where this is going to end up. Let's see what happens. But there's people onto something suspicious. Can you see?
And with that, the women who knew Carrie best, her cousin and aunts, decided they would not accept that suicide ruling.
Don't mess with our family. Don't mess with us. We will fight for the truth.
And that's what we want to see. That's what the Reason series is about. Trying to encourage you people who know something might be wrong, right? That, look, there is an answer. Where's that picture? Here, look. It's one phone call away. One phone call to change things. Let's see what happens here. I haven't seen this before.
Her family decided they would fight by launching their own investigation, hiring experts, and pushing so hard, friends began to call them the Charlie's Angels of Waco, Texas.
Linda finally said, I need my angels over here so we can talk.
Oh, I hope there's a part two.
My wife and I wanted to escape the city.
So viewers, there's a lot on this guy, Matt, whatever his name is, but I've found this just to jump ahead. He's obviously committed the crime, but let's see what happens.
Love trumps evil. Do you hear me? Love trumps evil.
For 3 years, she sought justice, and today, finally, Carrie Baker's mother spoke directly to her daughter's killer after he was sentenced to 65 years in prison.
Former pastor Matt Baker was convicted last night for the 2006 suffocation death he staged to look like a suicide. News Channel 25's Sarah Talbot begins our team coverage tonight and joins us from the courthouse for the emotional aftermath. Sarah?
And they were words that had been thought, not said. But tonight, after the verdict was read, Carrie's best friend and her mother got the chance to talk to Matt, to yell at him, and believe it or not, forgive him.
She had a sparkle that couldn't be put out. It couldn't be smothered, and it couldn't be suffocated, and it couldn't be taken away.
Emotions reached their peak tonight after the verdict was read.
Assess this punishment, therefore, at confinement in the Texas Department of Criminal Justice Institutional Division for a term of 65 years.
Those who wanted to speak out talked about Carrie.
And I know that right now, Carrie's watching right now from the clouds, and she's getting this opportunity to see this victory, and this victory for her whole family. And I want this chance to celebrate her.
All the while, Matt Baker still standing by his innocence.
I truly believe in my innocence. I believe the jury made a mistake in this.
But he only stood tall for so long, dropping his head when Carrie's mother got her chance.
I'm talking to you, Matt, today, okay? You haven't looked at me in almost 4 years. Can you look at me today? For a little while, okay?
Linda Doolin wept as she talked about her daughter and the love she had for her family.
And Matt, she loved you. But more than anything, she loved her girls. Her love for Kenzie, Cassidy, and Grace was engraved on her soul. Her soul. And then you took her from us, Matt. You discarded her like she was yesterday's trash.
And to the man deemed the murdering minister, Doolin reminded him of the flock he let down.
And you left so many other victims. The people in your churches who want to believe that the person leading them truly is a man of God. Your family, your family, Matt, your friends, the people who believed in you. You really can't look at me, can you?
And even through her pain and anger, Doolin reached out to Matt.
Then we have to step out and forgive. So we do. We forgive. Because that's the only way, Matt. The only way that love makes the way. So that eventually, just as in this case, love trumps evil.
Now, after those victims' impact statements were read, Carrie's family and even Matt's mother declined to comment, but the attorneys did, and Henry Rossoff is joining us now. Henry, what?
So there you go. Wow, gosh, good. So the bottom line of it is justice can be done if we can identify these perpetrators. Justice can be done. Don't let these people get away with what they're doing. It only takes one person to stand up and go, something isn't right, something's wrong, and the police will be there to help you. My daughter's a policewoman. I know how interested they are in getting these criminals, religious criminals. So this is Dr. Jason W. Morrison, theologist, New South Wales, Australia. Bye for now.